Last week in my monthly lunch and learn, which you should all check out, we learned about Shifra and Pua, heroes from last week's Parsha. Midwives, unclear if they were Hebrew or Egyptian, but midwives who defied Pharaoh's decree to kill Israelite baby boys. We spoke about the courage they must have had, how we can only imagine their fear and their faith. Without their strength, it's not hard to imagine that there would be no Jewish people today. In the days since our class this last week, something occurred to me that I hadn't fully processed or realized, which is that Shifra and Pua were not just being brave, they were breaking the law. Their story wasn't just a misunderstanding, it wasn't a social norm they disagreed with or didn't understand. It's not simply that Pharaoh didn't like the Jews. Pharaoh built an entire system around his fear. A system designed to control Jewish bodies, to control Jewish births. A system in which harsh labor became policy, in which state violence became law. So I think about conversations Shifra and Pua must have been having with their loved ones, with their communities. Were people telling them, you don't understand the big picture, these are real security concerns? Or maybe I agree with you in theory, but why put yourself at risk? Or perhaps, why are you making trouble? This doesn't concern you anyway. And so on. Shifra and Pua knew what was legal, but chose what was moral. And that raises a question that is asked in every generation and in every moment. What do we do when the law and morality point in different directions? Of course, the question doesn't only live in ancient Egypt. The Torah gives us a pattern to watch out for. Fear becomes policy, and policy can quickly but quietly harden into cruelty. There are moments when people stop being seen as neighbors and start being seen and treated as problems. And those are moments that the Torah calls on us to pay attention to and to watch out for. The tension between what is legal and what is right is a question that Jewish tradition has grappled with forever. The Pesachne Rabbi in the 19th century taught that for Jews, moral truth ultimately comes from God. In his view, actions are right or wrong because God commands them. So it's forbidden to steal only because God commanded us not to steal. It's forbidden to murder because God forbade us to murder. God forbade murder. For him, for the Pisechna Rebbe, morality doesn't exist on its own, but is rooted in divine law. But the Pisechna Rebbe is just one voice in our tradition. The other side of the argument comes from teachers like Rabbi Yochanan in the Talmud, who claims that even if the Torah had not been given, we would nonetheless have learned modesty from the cat, which covers its excrement. And we would have learned not to steal from the ant, which does not take grains from other ants. And we would have learned loyalty from the dove, who is faithful to its partner. Rabbi Yochanan comes with a powerful teaching and a reminder that humans are capable of recognizing right and wrong on our own, using what we learn from nature and what we experience through our lives, regardless of what the law says or if the law exists. This understanding of Jewish teaching is one in which legality and morality are separate. Law matters. We are a people of law. But conscience matters too, and we must be a people of conscience. Even without the Torah, without God's laws, the Talmud suggests we would have figured out that there is a right way, a decent way to care for the world and for the people around us, for each other. Whenever a policy or a law exists, Judaism asks, not only is this legal, but also is this humane? And that question is not theoretical for us right now. It's playing out in real time in our neighborhoods, in schools and hospitals and shopping centers and workplaces, in the lives of families across Minnesota. We're living in a moment when the language of legality, referring to humans as illegal, is drowning out the language of humanity. No human created in the image of God, B'Tselem Elohim, can be illegal. Our neighbors, our friends are scared to leave their homes. They're living under the threat of violence, the threat of separation from their families, and feeling unable to trust anyone. And we're talking about people who have built their lives here, who are raising children, caring for aging parents, contributing to the fabric of our community and our society, seeking the promise of the American dream. And yet the America they are living in today is meeting them not with welcoming and compassion, but with suspicion and anger. Today we hear echoes of Pharaoh's fear. There are too many of them. They're too different from us. In our parsha this week, Moshe and Aaron approach Pharaoh and say, "Let my people go." And Pharaoh's heart hardens. Vaychezak lev paro. And Pharaoh says no. And we heard about this from Dag just a little bit earlier, that time and time again they approach him, and every time Pharaoh says no, it becomes easier for him to say no. Each time his heart hardens, it becomes more likely that his heart will harden the next time. Rav Hirsch, in 19th century Germany, wrote that in the beginning of the process, Pharaoh was free to be generous or to be stubborn. And every time he chose the option of stubbornness, he conceded some of his free will. I didn't bring math like Dag did because I'm not really a math person. But each choice made it more likely that he would choose similarly the next time. And so while Pharaoh's heart was hardened by his own decisions at first, he ended up in a position where it was hardened for him. Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt likens it to how when we were kids and made ugly faces, our parents would say, "Be careful, your face might get stuck that way." Pharaoh made his heart ugly, she writes, and it got stuck that way. He wore grooves of injustice and lack of compassion into his heart and was then unable to change. This is how systems and societies harden too. One decision at a time until what was once unthinkable is somehow now normal. The Torah repeats more than any other commandment our obligation to care for the stranger. That's not a political slogan or a policy or a motto. It's a Jewish value. It's the core of Jewish values. And beyond that, our tradition insists on natural morality. That is to say, the basic understanding that there are ways to be decent and ways that are not. Shifra and Pua were not just brave. They were willing to put human dignity ahead of policy. I'm not calling on us today to put ourselves in danger defying the law. I'm asking us to remember that we don't need to choose between law and human dignity, but we must ensure that our laws reflect the dignity of every human. I'm reminding us to check on our neighbors, to support organizations that protect families, to speak with compassion in a moment that so desperately needs it. It's imperative that we show up in these ways, in any ways that we can, that we have the capacity for, because we each have a role to play as witnesses. Whether it's donating time or money, or showing up in person, or sending a text that says, hey, I'm thinking of you, how are you holding up? We're past the time for a chesed committee. It's time that we become a chesed community. And so if you're looking for ways to get involved, please be in touch with me after Shabbat. And if you or anyone you know needs a little extra support these days, please reach out. Let us remember to see the humanity in everyone we meet. May we keep our hearts from hardening and remember that no human is illegal. And when someone tries to insist that our neighbors deserve less compassion or less dignity, may we have the courage to say no. Shabbat Shalom.